Love does not brag. Love is not arrogant, and love does not act unbecomingly. Now, these three characteristics go together. In fact, they build on each other, and they're connected in that they usually accompany each other because they come from the very same source. In other words, a braggart is almost always arrogant, and an arrogant braggart almost always acts unbecomingly. And that's what I mean by these characteristics go together, build on each other, and almost always accompany each other because they come from the very same source. Is everyone with me? Now, turn back to 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and let's read verse 4 and the first part of verse number 5. Love is patient, love is kind, and is not jealous. Love does not brag and is not arrogant. It does not act unbecomingly. Now, let me give you a brief explanation of each one of these characteristics, and then we'll make application. So, look back at verse number 4, and I want you to underline the word brag. Love does not brag. Now, the word brag is translated from the Greek word perperuamahi. It's only used once in the Bible, and it's here in verse number 4. It literally means ostentatious rhetorical boasting. In fact, that's a very important definition. If you're taking notes, I want you to write this down. It literally means ostentatious rhetorical boasting. In other words, trying to impress others by bragging. You see, ostentatious means you're trying to impress others in a way that makes you the center of attention or the focus. And in this case, you're doing it by bragging. You can do it in different ways. Some of you dress ostentatiously. You want people to look at you. You want when you walk into the room. You know, how many of you remember when the punk fashion was going on? And you went out to California and you might see someone, the way they were dressed, they shaved both sides of the head, but they had a mohawk. And the mohawk stood about 8 inches tall and it was all these funky colors. You know, when they walked in, you couldn't help but stare, especially if you're from Oklahoma. Yes. And then it's like, why are you staring? Well, they want me to stare. They're dressing ostentatiously. They want to be the center of attention. They want to be the focus. Everyone with me? So in this case, Paul is talking about ostentatious bragging. You're doing it by bragging. Think of a person that always has to one-up someone. If you tell an interesting story, they have to tell a better story, a more interesting story. But the reason they're that way is because they want to be the center of attention. They want to be the focus of everyone's attention, which is exactly what ostentatious means. So, why is this contrary to true love? Well, Paul said that agape love doesn't ostentatiously brag. Here's what's interesting. We just put in there, love does not brag, and then we have problems with that. Because do we brag on our kids if they get a prestigious scholarship? Do we brag on our kids if they win an event? Well, if I love you, son, I'm sorry, I can't brag on you. No. This word means ostentatiously bragging. Everyone with me? So, what's interesting is Paul said that agape love doesn't ostentatiously brag. And again, I'm emphasizing the word ostentatiously because that's the key to understanding why Paul said that true love, agape love, doesn't brag. Remember, ostentatious means that you're doing it in order to become the center of attention or to become the main focus. And true love, agape love, focuses on the person you love, not yourself. A person who focuses on themselves and has to be the center of attention doesn't have agape love. You know, I kind of enjoy listening to music that's not Christian. Don't throw stones at me. But I want you to listen to Justin Bieber's song, Love Yourself. Here's a portion of the lyrics. 'Cause if you like the way you look that much, oh baby, you should go and love yourself. And if you think that I'm still holding on to something, you should go and love yourself. How many of you know that? Oh, yeah. All right. This song that he's written is about an ostentatious person. Egotistical, narcissist. In fact, in one line it says, my mama likes everyone, but she don't like you. And see, I understand that because My mom liked everyone. And if she didn't like someone, there was a reason for it. So I listen to this song and I think, wow. But he's singing about an ostentatious person, someone who has to be the center of attention. And he doesn't have true love, or they don't have true love. They only love themselves. So true love doesn't ostentatiously brag. Instead, it puts the focus on the person you love. They are the center of attention, not you. I like the way that R.C. Linsky says it. You might not know who Linsky is. He's dead now, but he was a renowned Greek scholar who wrote wonderful commentaries on the original Greek. So he wrote critical commentaries, basically. But this is what he says about this. True love never detracts from the praise that is due another, nor tries to make that person seem less and himself seem more important by comparison. Someone who deserves to be praised, true love wants to put the spotlight on them. Someone who doesn't have love, they don't like the spotlight being over there. If you're with someone who can never let you have the spotlight, but they're always hijacking the limelight, listen to me, they don't love you. They love themselves. Therefore, they need to take Justin Bieber's advice and just go love themselves. Yeah. Now, turn back to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse number 4, and I want you to underline the word arrogant. Love is patient, love is kind, and is not jealous. Love does not brag, and is not arrogant. Arrogant is translated from the Greek word phusiao. Phusiao. And what's interesting is that Paul is the only New Testament author that uses this Greek word. And of the 7 times that he uses it, 6 are in this epistle, the book of 1 Corinthians, because the Corinthians definitely had a problem with phusiao. But what does phusiao mean? It literally means to have an exaggerated sense of self, an exaggerated sense of self-importance. Now, I want you to understand something. The emphasis is on exaggerated. They have an exaggerated sense of self, an exaggerated sense of self-importance. You know, Paul told us in Romans chapter 12, verse number 3, not to think more highly of ourselves than we ought to. Take a look at what it says. For I say through the grace given unto me to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, according as God hath dealt to every man the measure of faith. Now, most people miss what Paul is saying because that translation sounds kind of religious. So let me explain what Paul is saying and what he's not saying. Paul is not saying not to think highly of yourself. He's saying don't think more highly of yourself than you ought to. I want you to notice how the NLT translates this verse, because it's actually a better translation of what the original Greek says. I know that's hard to believe, but it is. Notice what it says. Because of the privilege and authority God has given me, I give each of you this warning. Don't think you are better than you really are. Be honest in your evaluation of yourselves, measuring yourselves by the faith God has given us. You see, if we don't objectively evaluate what we're good at and what we're not good at, how would we know what we're gifted to do and what we're called to do? You see, what we're called to do, we're gifted to do, and what we're gifted to do, we're called to do. So if someone comes to me and says, I really don't know what I'm supposed to do with my life, you know what I ask them? What are you good at? And if they've been raised in church all their life, well, you know, I'm not good at anything. You think God made someone worthless? No. You have to honestly evaluate yourself to know what you're good at and what you're not good at. So Paul's not saying don't think highly of yourself. He's saying don't think more highly of yourself than you should. In other words, you need to objectively evaluate yourself so you can recognize what you're good at and what you're not good at. Now, let's relate this to what Paul said in regards to love. Whenever we think more highly of ourselves than we ought to, we have an exaggerated sense of self, which leads to an exaggerated sense of self-importance. And again, the emphasis is on exaggerated, which is what phusiao means. It doesn't mean a high sense of yourself, or you place a high importance on yourself. No, 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 no. You are so important, Jesus came to die for your sin. You are so important that the creator of this world wants to have an intimate relationship with you. But some of you have a higher sense of self-importance, an exaggerated sense of self-importance. And that's what phusiao means. As I said, Paul's the only one that uses this word, and he uses it specifically because he wants you to understand some of you have an exaggerated sense of self, an exaggerated sense of self-importance. So, why would this be contrary to true love, agape love? Well, it's contrary to true love because true love places a greater importance on the person you love than yourself. Did you hear that? True love places a greater importance on the person you love than yourself. Listen to me. Agape love always places a greater importance on the other person than oneself. Always. So when you see someone that's arrogant, that has the characteristics of phusiao, that means you'll never be the most important person in their life, at least not as important as they see themselves. When you're dating someone, and what they want is more important than what you want, what they need is more important than what you need, what they desire is more important than what you desire, that their career is more important than your career, that's phusiao.